Welcome to Albany Mennonite Church. Please join me in our gathering words. Come, all who hunger and thirst for more. God calls us to the feast. Weary exiles, longing for home, caught in a world that drains our hope. God calls to us. Listen so that you may live. My covenant is everlasting, my promise sure. Can joy ebb us here in this place of waiting? God's vision is higher than the heavens, stretching beyond what we can see. The invitation is for all people, from the farthest reaches of the earth. The word of the Lord does not return empty. It brings forth life. The mountains and the hills will burst into song. The trees of the field will clap their hands. God is the source of true joy, expanding our vision, lifting our eyes beyond the moment, beyond despair, into amazement. We are ready to enter God's story and be amazed. Please stand and join me in our gathering song, number 6, Let's Walk Together.
Yeah. Well, this is the moment in our service when we bring to each other those things in our lives that we would like to have prayer for.
We have been wandering in the dark, cold deserts of grief and despair, and we feel heavy, dry, and lifeless.
Come, joy of the world, come amaze us.
May your joy water our thirsty souls.
May that we may become our fountains of joy.
Freely sharing your joy with the world.
Okay, last week we heard the amazing story of, do you remember what was coming back to life? Bones, good job. Did anyone see, hear, or taste, or think about anything amazing that happened this week?
I tasted ribs. I saw Eddie in the hospital.
Lucas, did you have one? Yeah.
I thought maybe my sisters would go to the bowling alley with me, my mom, and my dad.
Those are some amazing things for sure. Today we're going to hear about some amazing words, a poem from the book of Isaiah in the Bible. Do you remember a time when you were really thirsty?
When I was thirsty, I was doing this.
Oh, yeah. All right.
When I didn't feel thirsty, but Mama said I was thirsty because I don't remember why, but it was yesterday.
Lucas, did you want to talk about being thirsty?
A couple minutes ago.
Sometimes it feels amazing just to drink a glass of cold water on a hot day. Yeah. Isaiah was a prophet who brought God's word to the people. God said, "Come, all who are thirsty, come to the waters." I'm going to need your guys' help. Let's go over to the trunk. Nope, right this. Yeah, it's kind of heavy. Oh. Nope. All right. Okay, we've got some
Sand?
bowls and vases. Thanks, everyone, for your help. Go ahead and stand over here. What is inside these glass things? Sand. Sand. What place on earth does that make you think of?
The desert?
Yeah. Or the beach?
The beach or a desert? Yeah. My sandbox? Maybe sometimes at our old house we had a sandbox.
Yeah. Yes, we're going to talk about the desert where nothing grows and where you need a drink. Yeah, I know. Cactus, you guys are just smarter than me. A lot of water. So let's have everyone. Oh, you found the water. We've got too smart of people up in here. They just know exactly what I'm doing with all the tricks. All right, and then you guys need to get some pieces of tree. I did. So you can all have a piece of tree. Okay, you all can have 2 pieces each. Okay. Because it is a real tree that I cut. Does everyone have 1 or 2 pieces? Yeah. Lucas, do you want a second one? Okay. So Everyone stand around so everyone else can see. Kaya, come over here. You want to be near? All right, Olive. Lucas, you want to come back over here so we can see? Photo op. Anyone? No, I'm just just playing. I was like, it looked perfect. All right. So I'm going to read the words from Isaiah. When I nod to you, are you guys ready to listen? Got to take them out. Not ready yet. You're ahead of me. That's the single signal to plant in the sand. The people in the congregation, you also have a job. When I say the trees of the field will clap their hands, guess what you guys get to do? Again, smart. You just kind of know the words. Yeah, okay. All right. So let's all listen very carefully. All right, let's see if I got this. All right. This is from Isaiah. As the rain. Nope, this is not concrete. This is sand. Wet sand now, yeah. As the rain and the snow came down from heaven and watered the earth, making it bud and grow. Already ahead. So my word that goes out from your mouth will also grow. They're just ahead of me. Okay. You will go out with joy and lead forth in peace. The mountains, the hills will burst into song before you, and the trees of the field will clap their hands. Listen, instead of the thorn bush will grow a pine tree, and instead of thorns, the myrtle will grow. This will be the sign that you will last forever, which will not be destroyed. All right, how's our trees? Growing? Awesome. All right, go ahead and go back over here and let's talk about it for a second. Yes, you can keep that. You're welcome. You're undoing what God grew. Okay, so hold on. Let's talk about it. All right. The word of God, which Isaiah grew, such an amazing garden in the desert. What came first before all the plants? Do you remember
Desert.
Okay, yes. But what became when God created the earth? What was first? What was one of the things?
Animals and trees and desert.
Yes, but we're talking before that. Starts with a W and ends in an otter.
Water.
Yay, you're so smart. Thank you. Yes, God gives rain that grows plants and food that allows us to live and experience joy. Here is our third Advent calendar, and it is joy. Yes. The picture reminds us, can you grab the picture for me, Kyle? That God gives us water and joy as we wait for Christmas. It also reminds us of places in the world where people are thirsty and where we can help to bring water and joy. So, what I have for you guys today is a craft. Yes, it has candles, but there's these prayer boxes that you guys get to make and decorate. And inside we have these candles, and on them you can write things that bring you joy or things you need to pray on. So some kiddos of the younger might need some help with that. All right. Go ahead and experience joy.
We'll switch our next two songs. We'll sing Light Dawns on a Weary World.
Justice Today's scripture is from the book of Isaiah. I'll be reading from chapter 40 and 55. Chapter 40, verses 1 through 5. Comfort, comfort, my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and proclaim to her that her hard service has been completed, that her sin has been paid for, that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. A voice of one calling in the wilderness, prepare the way for the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be raised up, every mountain and hill made low. The rough ground will become level, the rugged plains a plain. And the glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all people will see it together. The mouth of the Lord, our God, has spoken. Isaiah 55, 1 through 13. Come, all who are thirsty, come to the waters. And you who have no money, come, buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without cost. Why spend money on what is not bread, and your labor on what does not satisfy? Listen to me, and eat what is good, and you will be delighted in the riches of fare. Give ear and come to me. Listen, and you may live. I will make an everlasting covenant with you, my faithful love promised to David. See, I have made him a witness to the peoples, a ruler and commander of the peoples. Surely you will summon nations you know not, and nations you do not know will come running to you. Because of the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, for he has endowed you with splendor. Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call on him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake their ways and the unrighteous their thoughts. Let them turn to the Lord, and he will have mercy on them. And to our God, for he will freely pardon. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. As the rain and the snow come down from heaven and do not return to it without watering the earth and making it bud and flourish, so that it yields seed for the sower and bread for the eater, so is my word that goes out of my mouth. It will not return to me empty, but will accomplish what I desire and achieve the purpose for which I sent it. You will go out in joy and be led forth in peace. The mountains and hills will burst into songs before you, and all the trees of the fields will clap their hands. Instead of thorn bushes will grow juniper. Instead of briar, the myrtle will grow. This will be for the Lord's renown, for an everlasting sign that will endure forever.
My name is Gerrit, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm happy and excited and amazed that I can be part of this wonderful church here in Albany. And as I was sitting here this morning, I was amazed how the different parts of creating the sermon and spending this time together in worship are falling into place without us really talking and planning. I mean, there's a little bit of a big picture plan, but as I prepared for this week's sermon, I was kind of in my own little world, and I had no idea and didn't really have the time to think or worry about all these other components, and they all fit so nicely. Anyway, I wasn't going to say that, but it just amazed me, and being amazed fits into the sermon series we have this week. After World War II, my mom's parents, who were born in Ukraine and left their homes, found themselves in Germany without a home. without land, without money, without any real possessions. In fact, my grandma had lost her parents while she was trying to make it from Ukraine to Germany and took care of, I believe, 6 of her younger siblings. It was not an easy time. And not knowing where to go or what to do with a country that was in rubble, they ended up moving to Paraguay with the help of MCC. MCC had obtained permission from the Paraguayan government to make some land available to those who had lost a lot or sometimes everything to resettle and create new homes. So they ended up in the northwestern part of Paraguay, which is also known as the Chaco or the Chaco region, in a colony that became known as Neuland or is known as Neuland today. Now, let me sidestep this for just a second, because I also want to share a bit of my experience. I grew up in Germany. Germany does not have deserts. Germany has some slightly drier regions, mostly because of the soil composition, where there's a lot of sand and water doesn't get absorbed by the grounds very much, but there is no desert in Germany. So when I grew up, I always pictured a desert as this place where there's sand and sand dunes, maybe rocks, but where there isn't anything that really grows. Since growing up in Germany, I've had some experiences that look differently. My wife, Brianne, introduced me to Oregon, and when you get to know Oregon, you get to know the high desert at some point. And when I came out there, and people always called it the high desert, I expected there to be very little vegetation or anything really. And it was a little bit of a surprise to me that there's all sorts of shrubs, small trees, and wildlife, and really activity going on in what people call a desert. In 2019, just before COVID, I had a chance with my family to visit Paraguay and to visit the Chaco region. And based on the stories I had heard growing up and the very few pictures that my parents had taken over the years when they were there, way before I was born, I expected a very different place than what I experienced. Now, my parents were smart. When they planned our trip to Paraguay, they said, we're not going to go during the really hot and dry season, and we're not going to go during the rainy season that they have, because during the rainy season, there are still many roads that are not paved. Travel is really difficult. And during the hot season, well, you don't want to get out of any air-conditioned environment, so you wouldn't see anything. So they picked kind of the in-between, and I got to experience a little bit of both. I got to experience some dry days, where when we were traveling in our little pickup trucks that we had available to us, or in the little van that we traveled with on the first half of the trip, everything was really dusty. And sometimes you wondered how drivers were actually still moving with the amount of dust that was obstructing their view. And then we had some days where it rained just a little bit, and we got to experience the flip side, where roads became muddy and slick. They don't know ice out there, but mud can be just as bad as ice out here sometimes. And it was an adventure. It didn't make me think that I was in a desert. So as I was preparing for this sermon, I was trying to figure out what are some desert places that I can say I have been to and I have experienced that are not the Sahara in northern Africa, where there is nothing but sand. And I did a little search, because those were the two places. I mean, Eastern Oregon or Central and Eastern Oregon obviously are places I've been to now, but Paraguay was not really on a list of places that I expected to be considered a desert. And yet I came to find out that it is indeed on par with Eastern Oregon when it comes to the annual rain accumulation. There isn't a lot. What else are deserts known to? Deserts are not places that are known for being hospitable and inviting environments to spend a lot of time in. At least the deserts that we hear stories about. And it's interesting to see this, but thinking about this, it all started to make sense. Why did the Paraguayan government make this land available to foreign settlers that came out of really lush areas in Ukraine that had huge farms and successful farming operations? Well, it turns out it's a desert, and nobody in Paraguay thought that it was even an inhabitable country other than the native tribes that lived out there. So they said, well, we have all this land. We don't want to do anything with it. We don't really care what the natives think about doing there, which is probably not a good plan to start with. But we have this land. There are people who want land. Let them come. Let them do as they please. And so a lot of people ended up on ships, making the long journey across the ocean, ending up in Brazil, and then traveling up rivers or interesting conditioned roads to get to the Chaco, where they settled. Learning, though, arriving there, they realized that this land, even though it was more or less free to them, was not as inviting as it was made sound. It was a lot of work making a livelihood and surviving in those areas. In fact, for my grandparents, they decided that after 20 years living in the Chaco, living in the desert, trying to make a living, it was not worth it. They decided to move back to Germany, actually, where I ended up growing up, because the climate was so unbearable and it had some very unfriendly health implications, especially for my grandma, who could not bear to live in that climate. Deserts are not an inviting place. When we open this book, and I know Richard really wanted me to, move my Bible around and show it, but when we open the Bible, this book is filled with stories of deserts, or the wilderness, as it is often referred to, areas that are anything but hospitable. Some of the key stories that most of you probably remember is the people of Israel leaving Egypt, having Moses as their great leader who proclaimed and led them, with the help of God, obviously, out of a country that oppressed them into the desert, into a very unfriendly region. There was a promised land that was the destination they wanted to get to, but to get to the promised land, they had to get through the desert. If you read through the Old Testament, I'm not going to bore you with reading all of the Old Testament. We don't have the time or energy for that, and I'm sure you would all fall asleep. But as we read through there are other wilderness experiences that are being described, some literal and some figurative, where the people of God experienced something that was not hospitable, not inviting. We think about the exile and the time that leads up to the coming of Jesus in particular, where Israel had lost its independence and found themselves semi-free, living, but not really flourishing, and having a lot of difficulties. It is a metaphor that we sometimes talk about too, when things are not going our way, when they're not meeting our expectations. It seems like we're having a wilderness experience, something that makes us feel like we're not where we're supposed to be. As I read through these passages and these stories and the bigger picture of thinking about Advent and the coming of Jesus, there's another component that came to my mind. The wilderness is also a place that I feel looks like a lost identity. When the people of God left Egypt, they came out of oppression. They were forced to do things. They didn't have time to think about who they were or what they wanted to believe in or do. All they had to do was work for somebody else to reap the benefits of anything that was going on. And so when Moses led them out, one of their first significant steps was Mount Sinai, where they met God, where they learned a lot about God, where the law that guided how the nation functioned for years to come was given to them. And they, in the desert, found an identity that was tied to a promise, to a land, to be a nation moving forward. The separation of the nation of Israel after King Solomon, where the country split into two, was another identity crisis that started sort of a wilderness experience, culminating in the exile of first the northern kingdom and then the kingdom of Judah, both struggling with following God and living the life that they were supposed to live based on the law they had received on Mount Sinai. The stories that we read in the prophets indicate that the people living in exile in Assyria and Babylon and the Persian Empire they struggled with their identity amongst the foreign nations, amongst people that believed in different gods, that had a different culture, that didn't align with anything they knew. And they desperately were longing for something that would help them recreate their identity. And a lot of the practices that led all the way up to Jesus' time started developing right in that exile, where they were trying to find a new foundation for their faith. We heard two passages from the prophet Isaiah this morning, and thanks, Rob, for reading those to us. Isaiah 40 is a reminder that God is the source of comfort, even in the desert experiences, as he directly addresses the Israelites being in exile. He also talks about a way being prepared. And I love that imagery of mountains being lowered, being worn down, and valleys being filled, creating a plain pathway. If you know anything about ancient Near Eastern history, which I don't expect many of you guys are really that super interested in, it's something that was used usually only for victorious kings to make it to the areas that they occupied. They tried to make a path that was as even as possible to make travel easy. Isaiah is talking to a people in exile, a people that have lost their identity, a people that are struggling to find a purpose, and promises them that there will be made a path for them that leads back to the redemption that is to come for these people. The parts of the passage in Isaiah 55 that really stood out to me was the invitation that is offered for the thirsty to come, to find water, to hydrate themselves in a very dry environment. I don't know if you've gone to Eastern Oregon, but every time I go to Eastern Oregon, I feel like my lips are drying out as soon as I cross the pass, and there isn't enough chapstick around to keep them moist, and I can drink all the water in the world and it doesn't make a difference. But it's an invitation in a dry place to find water. And even more amazingly, to buy food without money. I mean, I don't know if you've gone to the grocery store lately. I don't do much of that. Most of it is done by Brienne in our house. But the one thing I keep hearing is nothing ever seems to get cheaper. Everything gets more expensive and more expensive. And here's Isaiah who says, you can buy stuff without money. It'll just be given to you. And it's an image that speaks of abundance. There's enough, there's more than enough for everyone to have what they need to live, even though you have come through this desert experience, the highway that led to a destination. So the prophet Isaiah really puts two things together in these two passages that are interesting on the path that Israel found itself on. Being lost in a wilderness or desert experience, being provided with a pathway home, which they ended up traveling home, rebuilding the temple some years later, and coming back to a place of abundance. Again, Richard, I'm going to lift my Bible up for you. If you open the Bible, he's showing me a dollar bill. I'm not trying to get paid for this. Sorry. If we open the Bible and if we look at the first chapters and the last chapters, there's stories around gardens that are the bookends of the Bible. In between, there's a lot of not so gardenish things that we read about. Wars, lost identities, trying to figure out how to follow God and how to make life work. But at the beginning, there's a garden, and humanity is placed in this garden. A garden filled with abundance, surrounded by rivers, by water that sustains both the garden and the gardeners that are there. If you flip forward all the way to the end, to the other extreme, in the last chapters of the book of Revelation, we read about the New Jerusalem, a city. And yet within that city, there's the river of life that flows directly out of the throne of God. And on both sides of the river, we read about trees of life that are planted, trees that bear fruit, that sustain life abundantly. There's no shortness of food for anyone. Everyone who comes there can flourish. I lost my note here for a second. I forgot to flip over. With the arrival of the Messiah that we anticipate during this Advent season, as we light the candles on the Advent wreath, if you have one, it was always a huge tradition for me in Germany. We had an Advent wreath with 4 candles. It's something that just invites us to remember that there's more and more light coming into a dark season, a hard season. And hard seasons are part of life. There's no doubt about that. It is a different experience for us today, obviously, than it was for first century Israel just before Jesus arrived. And yet it's a really good reminder to think that the things that we take for granted, the things that we think we know, might look very different than what some people had hoped for. And so Jesus enters the scene. He comes at Christmas. He is the long-promised person that led with his teaching and with his examples and invited people to follow. And in a sense, he is inviting his followers to plant little gardens, little oases for people to come. And it's not what was expected for someone to be a strong leader. A strong leader was supposed to build an empire, to build an army, to write laws and regulations to figure out how to make things work. Jesus is inviting his followers to plant little seeds, seeds of mercy, seeds of compassion, seeds of kindness, leading communities together to feel great happiness and pleasure, also known as joy. Listening to the words of the Gospels or reading the Gospels in the book of John, there are 2 things that also really build on the stories or the prophecies that Isaiah had written or spoken years earlier. The first one comes as he takes some time and sits down with a Samaritan woman at a well. Samaritans were not known to be part of the Israelite community, and it was really a countercultural thing for Jesus, sitting down, spending time with this person, and even having a conversation. But even more amazingly, Jesus talks about an opportunity to come to the water that is life-giving, that is quenching all thirst, speaking about himself. In another passage, Jesus says that he is, or I am, the bread of life. Bread being made from the crops grown in the gardens, something that was a fundamental staple in everybody's life, to sustain life, to help people survive, even in inhospitable environments. The way of Jesus was surprising to the people, and sometimes I feel like it's still surprising to us. A lot of the things that he said don't make sense when we look at the culture, at the society that we live in, at the things that people do or the ways people think. He tried to do something life-giving. He didn't engage into the power struggles of his time. He didn't seek power, and sometimes as I've been reflecting on the power struggles that be, whether it's today or throughout history, it feels like the people that struggle for power are people that can't find joy. And Jesus comes in and says, we're going to do something different, something life-giving, something that fills people with joy, even in the moments that seem so hard, giving them just this little piece of encouragement, the little light in a dark room. How did he do that? Well, Jesus fed people. He met a very basic need more than once. And when he didn't feed them, he often sat down with them to eat a meal. There's so many stories in the Gospels where food seems to be at the center. Jesus healed people. He healed the sick, he healed the broken and the wounded. Jesus listened to the people that he spent time with. Jesus built those personal connections. Really, Jesus built little pockets of communities all over the place, wherever he went, encouraging people to build on this. And if you know anything about the history and the culture of the ancient Near East, being hospitable, inviting people into your home, spending time together was a huge part of that. And he really makes it a life-giving event. So through meeting the physical needs, Jesus also addressed some of the spiritual needs. The lost identity. Even though Israel was a nation, the temple that was lost had been rebuilt, and they kind of had that physical center of their faith and their identity. They didn't really feel like they were free to live out who they were meant to be. Their worship practices were often interrupted by activities of oppressing nations and empires. Their religion, as we read through the Gospels, often seemed to be another means of oppressing people and limiting their freedom and their opportunities to experience joy. And instead of buying into that and adding to that, Jesus invites people to build relationships and to challenge the powers of empires, politics, and religious structures that are meant to oppress people. We've had this beautiful example of sand. This is what I remember deserts to be like. And there are two things that really helped me change my opinion. The first one is, I don't know if you remember this, but BBC released an amazing documentary series, Planet Earth, years ago. It was probably one of the more eye-opening experiences for me to watch the series, especially when it talks about deserts and dry areas and the life that is still contained in there. But more recently, I watched a different documentary that just in I think it was like a 15-minute or so video that I saw that covers a story out of northern Senegal. And if you don't know where that is, it's kind of on the west coast of Africa. And if you can picture a map of Africa, the Sahara is kind of this wide band that goes across northern Africa. Senegal is just on the southern border of the Sahara Desert. In this documentary, a group of people that partnered with the UN World Food Program believed that the desert is not destined to remain a wasteland that is useless, that is maybe threatening, because if you read the stories and read the history of the desert, it seems to be the wide band across northern Africa specifically that seems to be spreading south, taking land, taking away fertile soil, gardens, and other areas. And these people working with the UN World Food Program said, let's try and reclaim the desert lands. So one thing that happens as the desert claims land, and as land does not grow any plants really, the soil compacts and gets rock hard. And if it rains, which it doesn't happen a whole lot, any water that hits the ground just runs off. It doesn't soak into the soil, which is what plants need to live. For anyone who has a garden or has ever tried to keep a plant alive, you know it works better if they get water every so often. So they came up with this plan, and they started experimenting in parts where plants had not grown for over 40 years. Now, in the grand scheme of deserts, that might not be super long, but 40 years is quite a time for ground to be just barren and compacted. So what did they do? They started to break up the rock-hard ground by hand. No heavy machinery involved in this project. And loosen up the dirt, loosen up the soil, and create little half-moon-shaped dams that were catching any water on the downhill side of the landscape. If it ever were to rain, it would create little puddles, which would allow the water to sit in a place and slowly soak into the ground. And then they started to plant different kinds of plants. Some small annual crops, some bushes, some trees, to have nature work in their favor too. because as your plants grow, especially as trees and bigger plants grow, they grow roots, and the roots go down into the ground. They break up the ground. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but they have the power to work through our infrastructure sometimes. You'll find water pipes, especially sewage pipes, that are just filled with roots because they use the tiniest cracks and expand them and keep growing and working their way in. And so breaking up the soil in a lot of hard work, they started a process that these people with the UN World Food Program are hoping will create forests, fields, gardens that help sustain the people that were fleeing the areas because they were so dry and hot and inhospitable. Mennonite settlers like my grandparents, when they first came to Paraguay, did very similar work. They might not have used the same techniques, but they figured out ways to take the Chaco in Paraguay and make it livable, to make the land bear crops. Listening to the stories my grandma told when I was little, they did gardening out there. And honestly, even after being there, I wonder how they made things work in the weather that they have. But they grew crops, they grew vegetables, they grew trees. And the fruit out there is amazing if you ever have a chance to go. Jesus, through his teachings and ministry, taught us that even in the wilderness experiences, we can find joy. We can find abundance in those little gardens that we may plant. Even if the overall environment we find ourselves in seems anything but inviting. So we can find joy in compassion, in mercy, in love, in peacemaking. And he also taught that all of these start at the personal relationship level. It's easy to talk about peacemaking when we talk about conflicts between nations and empires or political parties, where it's more of a tactical back and forth trying to negotiate big things. But how does that look like on the personal level? I'm sure that all of you always agree with all the people around you, no matter what, right? Lily says totally. So part of it is just starting the conversations and sitting down and finding common ground. Maybe even if the common ground is the food we're eating, the ribs that we heard about this morning that really made me hungry way too early in the day. He taught his followers to step away off the desolation of the desert that I see in the power struggles in empires and countries and politics, and sometimes in organized religion where what we call faith is being abused for the purposes of power. Jesus invites us to join his mission, to change how we think about the things that are going on and find joy in those personal experiences along the way. To spread joy. In Senegal, the story I told just a couple of minutes ago, it takes one person, one day, to create one of those half-moon-shaped little dam areas. That's about 12 feet wide. Now, I'm sure you can all picture what 12 feet are. It's not a very large area. And spending 8 to 12 hours breaking up the ground, I can only imagine how much those people sweat doing all of this in the sun without any shade available to them. But creating those half-moon shaped areas, and their pictures, you can find them on the internet if you get bored this week and look up Senegal and reclaiming land from the desert. I'm sure you'll find some pictures. There are like hundreds, if not thousands, of these half-moon shaped areas in those pictures that you can identify. I didn't go as far as look at Google Maps to kind of find the satellite imagery, but that could be another interesting project to learn more about this. But It's not a single person doing this. It's communities coming together, working side by side, creating numerous of these dams, planting those initial fruits or plants on those dams, some on top, some in those holes, depending on how much water a plant needs or can handle. Making a change, like Jesus started doing, is not something that can be accomplished simply by one person. And so Jesus invites each one of us to become part of the change-making process through the smallest little things that we do in our daily lives, as we engage with one another, as we care for one another, as we are patient with one another when we don't agree and try and find common ground. We are invited to be a part of this. And once change starts taking a hold, it's easier for the joy that comes out of it to spread beyond the little pockets where it started. As you light the third candle of Advent this week, if you do this at home, think of something small that you could get involved in with others that can spread the joy that Jesus brings to us.
In response, let's stand and sing number 209, We Dream of a Turning.
We're grateful for all the gifts that we have here in this congregation that we share with one another. For sound people, multiples of them, people upstairs running the Zoom. Grateful for the gifts of helping children see God's love and grace. And we're grateful for people that are willing to bring sermons playing piano, leading songs. Each of you are a gift to this congregation and to your communities that you live in. And so I'm borrowing a prayer from Voices Together. There is no scarcity. There is no shortage, no lack of love or compassion, of joy in the world. There is enough. There is more than enough. Only fear and greed make us think otherwise. No one need starve. There is enough land and enough food. No one need die of thirst. There is enough water. No one need live without mercy. There is no end to grace. And we are all instruments of grace. The more we give it, the more we share it, the more we use it, the more God makes. There is no scarcity of love. Amen.
For our offering song, we'll sing numbers 777, Seeds. And we'll sing it through twice. So if you don't know it, you can hum along first time if you want.
These seeds you have sown in our hearts and in our homes, cover them with your love. Use our hands, use our feet to show your love and your peace, and cover us,
God of joy, as we go into this third week of Advent and remember the anticipation of Jesus coming and Jesus changing our world, help us see the joy like a candle in a dark room. Help us spread the joy like a fire giving warmth to those sitting around it. And help us be reminded of what it is that you bring into our lives every day. Amen.